He's the essence of the word wild. Cowboys say he was born to be rode. Others say he was born to be free. Over 400 years ago, the Spanish conquistadors brought the first horse to North America. They called him Mustaño, and they conquered half of Mexico astride his back. When the Spanish were vanquished by Indians, disease, and wilderness, the rugged horse stayed on and formed wild herds. They roamed the land as free as the antelope and the buffalo. But again, the horse was destined to be tamed and corralled. First by the American Indian, who used him for hunting and transportation. Then by the Europeans, who saddled him and crossed the American wilderness. As the people changed, as the Industrial Revolution rushed us into an uncertain future, so once again the role of the horse changed. He was sent back. He was set free. As mechanization increased, many ranchers and farmers turned their horses loose on the open range. These horses joined wild herds, and soon there were thousands roaming the West, competing with domestic stock and wildlife for the choice grazing land. The people reacted by trapping the horses or destroying them outright.
Free and easy, roaming free along the plain, never knowing what tomorrow will bring. Man has shaped my destiny, I'm on the run again, and I'm heading for a fate never planned. On the run and on the loose, I'm searching across this land for a place to call my home. I'm shackled and I'm sheltered by a force I've never known, and my heart cries out to let me roam again. Sands of time have branded me a renegade alone. Though I've never known why they care. Just leave me here and let me feel the land I call my home. Just my own, the land I call my home. On the run and on the loose, I'm searching across this land for a home and a place to call my home. I'm shackled and I'm sheltered by a force I've never known, and my heart cries out to let me roam again. Yeah, my heart cries out to let me roam again. Oh, won't you please let me roam again.
In time, the great herds diminished, and their very survival was in doubt. In 1971, the Congress passed an act known as the Wild and Free-Roaming Horse and Burro Act. It provides for the control, protection, and management of wild horses and burros by the Secretaries of the Interior and Agriculture. This act helps to ensure the survival of the wild horse and burro. But there are still other problems to face, those of ecological balance on the range. A typical horse is a 900 to 1,200 pound machine made up of hide, bone, muscle, and an appetite. To keep the machine running at top efficiency, the horse must consume a large amount of forage every day, 25 pounds or more. In the West, it may take more than 20 acres of rangeland to support just one animal. When animals and range are kept in balance, They live in the kind of harmony nature intended. The plant nourishes the horse, and the horse acts as an unofficial pruner that keeps the plant producing healthy new foliage. This balance is upset when there are more horses, livestock, or wildlife than the food supply can support. The overpopulation of horses isn't hard to understand when you realize that a mare will give birth to 4 or 5 colts in a lifetime. With few natural predators, this is enough growth potential to overgraze a range in a short period of time. This was true even when the whole West was their range. Overgrazing may start slowly, but the end results are devastating to the plants, horses, and other wildlife. The first sign of overgrazed land is the disappearance of the plants that grazing animals like best. When these are gone, the horse will move to less desirable forage, so-called starvation plants. This is a sign that trouble is ahead. Animals begin to show signs of malnutrition, and the competition for food increases among horses, wildlife, and livestock. Every animal on the range is maintaining a precarious balance. A hard winter or outbreak of disease will kill off the weakest animals, and if conditions get bad enough, the whole herd could be wiped out.
Winter's a bad time for the wild horses, just as it is with the wild animals, the game that's out there. It's a time of the year that the forage is unavailable in some areas because of the deeper snows. It's a season of the year when the animals are under a tremendous stress because of low temperatures, because of unavailable forage. The mares are in foal, and this also places additional stress on the mares. The entire herds are limited in the country that they can get around in because of the deeper snows. In some of the areas where we do have deeper snows, I've seen the horses digging through to get down to the grass that's under the snow. This makes a lot of work for the horse just to get the available forage, and at times may not be worth the effort expended to get it. The horses are in these areas year-round. This place is quite a stress on the habitat because various times of the year we have the wildlife in there, especially when they move into the lower ranges where they're using it for winter range along with the horses that are there year-round. And in the spring and summer and fall we have cattle in the same areas. This place is a tremendous demand on the available forage in these areas. This is the primary reason we have to be concerned with the number of horses in the areas. The carrying capacity of a given range has to be considered. The carrying capacity of the horses, the wildlife, and the cattle.
It's a cold and lonely winter and there's nothing I can do. Make time pass easier, it seems. Well, I'm reaching out for a piece of life, make it through this day, and tomorrow I'll begin it all again. But I see spring sweet finger peeking through the early morning haze, telling me and mine to keep going on. We'll find our way on another day, not like the one before, as we roam the hills and valleys of our home. But I see spring sweet finger peeking through the early morning haze, telling me and mine to keep going on. We'll find our way on another day, not like the one before, as we roam the hills and valleys of our home. Yeah, we roam the hills and valleys of our home. I wanna roam the hills and valleys of my home.
An extended winter that goes on later than normal, causing a late spring, can create problems for the mares, since this is the time of the year that they're foaling. Winters create problems for the older horses and for the extremely young horses, in the sense that the stronger horses in the herd literally take the available forage, and the old and the young are not able to compete. And if it goes on long enough, this can cause death of the individuals that are not able to compete.
After a hard winter, our wild horses don't look so wild or free. They are trapped by a force they do not understand. They search for food. We must look for solutions. Before we can find these solutions, we have to know the actual number of horses that occupy an area and the type of environment they frequent, range, mountains, or desert. The inventory is a tedious and time-consuming task. It involves highly skilled men and sophisticated machines. The use of aircraft allows the inventory team to cover millions of acres that are home to some 40,000 wild horses and burros. When horses are finally found, their location is carefully plotted, age classifications are made, and the size of each group recorded. Unusual groups, such as all male or bachelor herds, are noted. Distinctively colored animals, called marker horses, are singled out and photographed. By observing these markers, we get a better understanding of group size, areas of use, and interchange of horses with other herds. This information is critical in the management of wild horses and burros. and aids the range manager in making projections on the health of the horses and the forage they live on. Other wildlife is also observed by the inventory team and their numbers recorded. These animals must also depend on available forage for their survival. But when an area is finally overgrazed or too heavily populated, it can place other wildlife or domestic stock in danger. Then steps must be taken to control the wild horse and burro herds. Forbids placing wild horses and burros where they did not exist before. So moving them to already heavily populated areas is not the solution. Another option for reducing an overpopulated herd is to catch the wild horses and find interested and qualified people to care for them. By law, wild horses can be rounded up only on horseback. This difficult task is also very expensive. It can cost $800 or more to catch just one wild horse.
I've ridden the range, but that's probably the hardest riding I ever did.
We usually get up around 4 o'clock to get out here and then start, and then we usually get back home about 8 or 9.
Well, on this particular herd of horses, there's a rancher that owns part of the land that was in this particular area, and he fenced about somewhere around 1,200 acres. And the horses had been moving from what's called Yank Springs onto this other property, and when he fenced up this other property, well, the horses moved right back up on Yank Springs, which is about 6,000 feet elevation, and they just grubbed it out. Actually, these horses have all lost a lot of weight in the past 2 months. It'd been better if they was off of the range 2 months ago, because they've lost a lot of weight and eaten up the grass that they really should have had there for next winter. This winter, I don't think that this particular herd of horses would have survived. At least we've had a lot of death loss among the horses. For the simple reason that we've had, of course, the past year we've had an increase in the horse numbers, you see, and then when this land was fenced up, and it caused them to graze the range in kind of a fashion different than they were used to. They were just building themselves a booby trap to get winter killed this winter. Now the horses we turned back out, of course we're going to turn them in the north end for a while anyhow, and we hope that they kind of stay down there and adapt to that country. If they go back up to where they came from, well, we're going to have some death loss on the horses that we turn back even. I wouldn't be surprised.
When the horses are finally rounded up, they're placed in a temporary corral to await transportation to another way of life.
Feed's been pretty scarce, and getting too many of them. Can't feed them.
The number of cattle and other domestic stock the range can support is also determined, and their numbers reduced. This is important in preserving the habitat.
There's approximately 5,000 acres out here and about 100 horses. And the main reason for the roundup here in the Burns District is that the horses are eating themselves out of house and home. And some of the horses we brought in were real poor and probably wouldn't make it through the winter. And so we're trying to gather them and leave approximately 20 horses out here. This is what we think the carrying capacity probably will be here in this area.
People have come from miles away to receive a wild horse provided under the Bureau of Land Management's Transfer of Maintenance program. Or more simply, they've come to give a wild horse a foster home. Unfortunately, some who have qualified to get a wild horse do not show up. This method, the transfer of maintenance, is the most pleasant of the options to overpopulation, but difficult to implement. It is hard to place older horses. The colts or younger horses are more desirable. But the older ones must also be removed to keep a healthy, balanced herd. In short, it looks like the supply of horses will exceed the demand. Consequently, some wild horses will have to be destroyed. Despite the unpleasant aspects, this is far more humane than a slow death by disease and starvation.
And this agreement here says that this animal will be used for pleasure and not for any commercial venture. Mm-hmm. And that any time that you cannot take care of the animal, well, you have to notify the Bureau, and we can take the animal back if it's necessary.
The way I got my horses, I read about there's going to be a roundup and some horses released to people. I read it in the Eugene, Oregon paper, and so I applied because of my interest in the horses, wild horses and such. I do own 2 horses of my own now.
BLM's operation here on the Kiger herd is one more thread in this tapestry. It is fulfilling one of the provisions of the law, which was passed in 1971. And it's very gratifying to me to see that law in operation, see it actually working. And we can see here being on the ground, seeing the horses, going out to the area where they were rounded up, seeing the range and conditions of the animals and the range, that this one was definitely a necessary operation.
A couple of years ago, I saw on TV where the war organization had some young colts to give away that needed homes, so I wrote in, and my letter got there after the deadline, so Mrs. Johnson wrote a letter saying that she'd keep me on a list in case they had any other horses that needed homes. So about a little less than 2 months ago, I got a letter from the war organization saying that the BLM had a couple of young colts that needed homes, so I phoned in right away, and we made arrangements, and I went down to Carson City and picked him up later that week. Well, after I got him home, I started by trying to build him up because he was fairly skinny and everything, so I tried to give him quite a bit of hay, 2 good-sized chunks, and some grain to fill him out a little, and he's coming along pretty good right now. When I started gentling him, I wanted to start by teaching him to lead, which wasn't any problem at all, because a couple of days and he was coming along real well, like he already knew it and everything. And so 4 weeks ago, I got on him. I didn't have much to get on him with, but I did, and he threw me off, of course. And so I got back on him. He threw me again. I got back on. Stayed on that time long enough that he didn't throw me. So we started putting the saddle on him yesterday. We put it on him. He didn't particularly like it, but he's coming along okay, and I think he'll get used to it. once I finally get him gentled down, I'd like to just use him as a pleasure horse and just for my own pleasure to ride him around, and he is in my custody. Actually, not really mine, but I have custody of him.
They are so majestic and free, yet all freedom has a price. But that price should not be starvation or extinction. This is the dilemma of horses and men, domestic stock and wildlife, range rights and the rights of wilderness. It is our job to manage the range and provide a proper balance between domestic stock, wildlife, and the magnificent wild horse.